Hello, my name is Lena Golubtsova. I'm a strategic programs manager at the Toronto Arts Council, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about Artists in the Library program, which is one of our strategic funding programs, and it is in partnership with Toronto Public Library. The deadline to apply to this program is October 2nd, 2023. And I'm going to walk you through the program guidelines, essentially, which is a PDF document that could be found on our website on the dedicated page to the Artists in the Library program. But I'm going to walk you through the guidelines to maybe try to make it a little bit easier to understand. So first thing to know is that this program is specifically to create and deliver community engaged programming in one of the selected branches of Toronto Public Library. And the programming should take place in the fall of 2024. So you're applying this year in 2023 by October the 2nd. And then if the application is successful, you will be delivering your programming in the branch next year in the fall. And the funding that this program provides is $20,000 for all projects. This is a fixed grant or fixed amount grant. The participating artists will deliver free public arts programming, visual and media arts installations and exhibitions, workshops, artist talks, open studio sessions, arts education, mentorship programs, and other arts activities open to the public at the selected branch and beyond. So those were the examples of potential programming, but they're not an exhaustive list. You really can come up with other ideas as long as they engage the community at the branch. Also, they must be free of charge, open to everybody to participate or to attend. And finally, they must be time-based, so not permanent. Permanent exhibitions and installations are not eligible for this program. All funded projects will be produced by the grant recipient and hosted and supported by the assigned library branch. These are the basic facts about the program, and let's look a little bit further into what are the potential projects for this program, but also why this is a wonderful program that is worth applying to. Arts funding obviously provides funds, grants for the artists to work on their projects, but in this case, which is also the case with some of our other strategic programs, you would also have access to the library branch space and support of the library staff. You will have an opportunity to explore your art practice in a community setting, engage with the branch and its surrounding community in a meaningful way. Of course, work closely and be supported by the branch team. Navigate a multi-stakeholder environment and create and deliver community-engaged arts programming from start to finish. So you get funding, space, and support all in one. And also starting this year, all artists will receive insurance coverage under TAC liability policy. So no need to worry about that or include that into your budget starting this year. On the screen, there is a list of examples of the projects that were delivered within this program in the past. Just to expand on some of the examples, so rather to add to the list, we are having an amazing DJing workshop programming this year in one of the branches as well. We have a comic book course with also knowledge sharing on Persian miniature that is being incorporated in the in the comic book arts programming. There is also a sound mapping and listening program in one of the branches, as well as children musical creation and presentation. So as you can see, the variety of possible programs is really big, and anything really can be proposed and considered for this program as long as it engages local community and is feasible for the proposed branch. Who can apply for the program? Really, anybody who can apply for TAC programs can apply for this one because it is open for individual artists, artist collectives, as well as organizations. And importantly, working in any artistic discipline. Of course, artists have to be professional, which, TAC defines as someone who has developed their skills through training and or practice, is recognized as such by artists working in the same artistic tradition, actively practices their art, seeks payment for their work, and has a history of public presentation. But we also recognize that sometimes the professional artist can still have questions about the eligibility, as well as we recognize that due to systemic barriers within the broader arts community, some flexibility may be required in interpreting this eligibility criteria. So if you have questions about whether you can be considered a professional artist or are eligible to the program, please reach out to me and we can discuss. But the likelihood, if you consider yourself a professional artist, then you are. Along with this general eligibility, we have eligibility requirements specific to, what are the programs that you already applied to TAC. We have two funding envelopes, which is arts discipline and strategic programs. So art disciplines, it's pretty self-explanatory, things like dance project, visual arts, visual and media arts project, theater project, as well as operating programs in those and other disciplines. And strategic programs are things like animating historic sites, open door, animating Toronto parks. And of course, artists in the library, as mentioned, is also part of the strategic funding envelope. And what does it mean? It means that if you already applied to one of the discipline-based programs or arts discipline programs, you can still apply to Artists in the Library. Or if you already have a grant in discipline program this year, that's not a problem. However, if you have an active application in a strategic programs, one of the strategic programs, then you will not be able to apply to Artists in the Library until your project is complete and final report is filed and approved by the program manager of that program. If you have any questions about it, please reach out. We also have a few exceptions, such as TAC Leaders Lab, Newcomer and Refugee Artist Mentorship, TAC CS Digital Solutions Incubator, Black Arts, Indigenous Arts. And those are the programs that don't count toward the limit of one project per funding envelope per year. So those could be applied for and received on top of the two, one strategic and one discipline based. In addition to Artists in the Library grant, which is $20,000 as mentioned, artists who are deaf, living with mental illness, or living with disabilities can also apply for up to $5,000 in TAC Accessibility Grant. To do so, just please fill out the tab with information about the required expenses, as well as mention the artists who will require supports and their role on the projects. on the project. It's important to note that this grant is not meant to support audiences or participants on your project. By participants, I mean, for example, you engage in youth group to be part of your project. This grant is specific to the artists who you already know will be working on your project. And please, again, reach out if you have any questions about that at all. On the screen, there is a list of 15 participating Toronto Public Library branches. This list has been updated. If you are familiar with the program, you will notice a few newly added branches, and then some of the branches are not on the list this year, but they might be coming back in the future. You will need to select only one branch from this list and design your proposal to be specific to that particular branch. Consider things like what kind of connection do you have with the local community? Do you have local artists who live nearby? Do you have any interest in, local community or local environment, or site-specific things such as geographic features or architecture or history of a particular building or even a particular neighborhood? So site specificity can be really understood quite broadly here, but it would really be great if the project had some aspect of site specificity to it, and that you could really answer the question why you want to work in this particular branch, as opposed to just, the project could actually happen in any branch. So the pick is quite random, which, if that's the case for you, that's fine too. You could still apply and you could still be successful, but ideally there is certain connection to your chosen branch. So think about what that might be. And of course, please identify any artists who are local to the branches who are working on your project. It can be you as an applicant. It can be one of your collaborators. Please only include collaborators, the artists and other folks who know that you're including them on your proposal. Excuse me. And as you see on this map, the branches, all the branches participating in the program, they are largely outside of downtown core. This is one of the ideas behind strategic programs, in particular with Artists in the Library program, to really give access to communities outside of downtown core to free arts programming, as well as provide artists local to those communities with spaces to work, to create their work in and to present their work in. So that's the idea behind the program. Does it mean that as an artist or organization based downtown, you cannot apply? Not at all. You can still apply. And sometimes, this is a way for downtown-based organizations or artists to reach new audiences, or even to, bring your work that sometimes is hard to access for people living outside of downtown core, to bring it to them in an accessible way. So that is also a possible approach to this program. So think how how your proposal fits within the program, and make sure it is clear in your application, and do include and mention any local connections if you have those at all. Of course, how to apply is an important question. All the applications are being accepted online at our portal. Once you register, the portal will guide you through all the steps that you need to take to fill out your application. And the portal will even pre-screen you in terms of basic eligibility requirements that I didn't mention before, but that you must be a resident of the city of Toronto for at least 12 months, and you need to reside in the city for at least 8 months in each year. For collectives, if there are 2 collective members, both must be residents of the city of Toronto, and if there are more collective members, then the majority of the collective members must reside in Toronto. And of course, organizations have to be Toronto-based and have a Toronto address, and PO box cannot be accepted as an address. So those questions will be asked of you if you are creating your TAC account or profile for the first time to ensure eligibility, and from there you will be forwarded or you will be offered the option to choose this specific program to open your application and apply. And I do suggest that you open the application and look through all the fields that are asked of the applicants, because this will give you idea of workload that is required to submit your application, and you can plan your time effectively. And if, as an applicant, you identify as a deaf artist, artist living with disability, or artist living with mental illness, you can also request application accessibility support. So you can have a service provider supporting you with creating and submitting your application, and TC will cover the cost of the service provider of up to $500 per applicant per calendar year. If you think that you could use this support and you have questions or you would like to request the support, please call or email me. And I will walk you through the next steps on how to get your service provider paid. And please reach out ahead of time if you can. We're asking, to reach out to the program manager 6 weeks ahead of the program deadline. If 6 weeks have passed, that's no worries, but please do it as soon as you realize that, oh, I'm going to be applying for this program and I would need application accessibility support. At this point, I would like to review the application, or what the application consists of. As mentioned, do log in first and look through it. But this is roughly what you're going to see. There will be a voluntary self-identification tab, which is not visible to peer assessors or anybody else. And this is mostly for statistical purposes, helpful for TAC's research and equity work, as well as sometimes it comes into play when it comes to our equity priority policy during the assessment process. But it's absolutely voluntary, and it's also confidential. Then the next tab in the application is applicant ID, that is pulled from your profile when you first created. If you did create your profile a while ago and now you decide to apply, maybe for the first time in a while, or for the first time at all, make sure that all information is correct. One thing to note about the application and applicant is that if you created your profile as an individual, you cannot apply as a collective under the same profile. You would need to create a new TAC profile for collective or to apply as an organization. Then the first tab, or like the first portion of the application proper, will be project details. You will be asked to name your branch selection and specify why you chose this branch. You will also be asked to provide your project dates. Please note that in this program, it is asked or at least it is suggested that all the programs will take place at the branches in the fall of 2024. There is some flexibility available to the applicants, or rather to the recipients, to work with their assigned branch to see if other scheduling is possible. But generally speaking, it's September to December 2024. And when you put your project dates, keep in mind that your project end date will determine your final report due date, which will be 90 days after the project end date. Then you are asked to provide a project summary, and this is a very short description of your proposed project. Please be very specific with how you describe your project in a few sentences, and please be mindful of the fact that this is a multidisciplinary program, and as such, there will be people on the peer review panel who will be reading and assessing your application, who are not necessarily familiar with your artistic practice or form. And I will talk a little bit more about how panels are being assessed, but use plain language. Don't assume knowledge on your artistic field from everybody on the panel, or like everybody who reads the application, and say what the project is before you start telling us how amazing it is and how important it is, what it is first. Then at this tab, you will also be asked to provide brief bios for all the contributors. You will see the project contributors table. Please fill it out with everybody that you already know will be working with you, but also those artists you included should have agreed to be included, and they agreed to be part of your project. It's okay if you don't know all your participants or all your contributors, rather. You don't need to put, artistic director TBC. Just list whoever you already know, and then in the project description, you can describe your process, saying, for example, that you will put a casting call to fill other roles on your project. When you are building or filling out your project contributors table, please include yourself as an applicant. Whether you're an individual artist or you're working for an organization, chances are, if you're submitting the application, you also have a role on the project. If it's an administrative role, that's great. Still include that and specify your role as well. Please provide short bios for everybody who you are listing. You could include resumes as well. Those should be up to 3 pages per individual, per resume. But otherwise, short bios are completely great. And if you want to, include them as a one PDF, that would be greatly appreciated and really will make it easy for the panel to see your entire team and who those artists are in one document. So that's my suggestion. And then you are also asked to provide your project description, of course. So that's the biggest field of the application. And you can here talk more in detail about what you want to do. Then also you will be asked to provide your artistic goals and objectives. Essentially, why do you want to do it? And then, of course, how will you do it? And that will include outreach and audience development plan, work plan, and access plan. In terms of access plan, it relates to measures taken to make the event accessible to audiences. And you can see more information on access planning on TAC website. Please note that any accessibility measures that you're taking to accommodate the audiences must be budgeted for, and that will have to come out of your budget of 20,000, or your budget might be higher, but it would come out of your budget as opposed to TAC Accessibility Grant that is specifically to cover accessibility costs to support the artists working on the project. The next tab on the application is support material. This is really, really important. This will show the panelists the most who you are as an artist and what it is that you're proposing to do. Please read through all the technical or file requirements when you are filling out that portion of the application. Ensure that if you're providing the links, they are either open to public or you're also including the password. Please be strategic about what you are choosing to show, knowing and keeping in mind that the panel will only have a few minutes to review your support material. So if there is a specific moment in your video that you want them to see, it's best to actually do a clip and only upload that 1 minute or 30 seconds, or else you can make the video start in the spot that you want the panel to see. Avoid uploading very large videos or very big PDFs with a lot of information, because in that event you don't know what will be perceived by the panel, because if it's very long, there is no capacity to review the documents in their entirety. And then the next tab will be budget information. This is a very important portion of your application. There will be a budget table as well as an opportunity for you, or rather a requirement, to upload a supplementary budget PDF. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about this. So the budget table is something that is the same. So it's not specific form for this program. It is a budget table that is being used across all TAC programs. And as such, you will see that there are some lines that will not apply to you. For example, there is a line asking you to fill out your earned revenue, such as tickets, for example. Just leave that blank, because that doesn't apply, because you cannot charge admission or workshop fees or anything like that. You cannot charge audience and participants in this program. So only fill out the fields that apply to this program and to your specific project. It's important to really be very specific in your supplementary budget about, what those amounts are comprised of. For example, you will put your artist fees on the budget table. Let's say you will be paying $10,000 in artist fees. In your supplementary budget, don't just repeat that. Don't say $10K in artist fees, but rather break that down. You will say specifically, this much money goes toward this artist, and so on and so forth. So you break it down by person or by role if you don't know those individuals' names yet. But then you also, it's recommended that you further break it down by, how those amounts have been calculated. Let's say you have 3 workshops you're paying for to this particular artist. You refer to Carfax fee schedule for a workshop day, and then you multiply it by the number of workshop, and so on. So the more particular, or the more specific you are about breaking down your artist fees, the less there might be questions whether you're paying too low, you're paying too high. If you break it down, it will be very clear, and it will really answer any questions the panel might have about your budget before they even have them. So details are important, and don't you can always include text in your supplementary budget table. Don't feel confined to the kind of table mode. You can use narrative to talk about your budget as well, as long as it's very clear how, what you wrote in your project description, how it's reflected in your budget. Because, for example, if you say we are including, 10 local contributors who will be working with us to, for example, build, I don't know, like create ceramic pieces, and we're going to exhibit these pieces. But then in the budget, let's say you don't include any artist fees for those contributors, then it raises a question: are you asking folks to do artistic work without being compensated for it, right? So either spell it out that you're including people as volunteers, or you're just inviting people to learn from you and create that work as part of their learning, or else include the number that you're going to be offering them as an artist fee, and so on. And that applies not only to artist fees, but your entire budget. And the more details you include, the more convincing it will be to the panel that you really know what you're doing, and you're capable of executing the project exactly as proposed, which is one of our assessment criteria, along with a few others. And in terms of the budget, the last thing to add is that this program does not require you secure other sources of funding. So you can just have a budget of 20,000, and 100% of that will come from this grant. You could have additional revenue, but it's not necessary. It is important that the budget is balanced, so the revenue equals the expenses. And it's also important to remember that individual artists receiving this grant, as well as other TAC grants, will be issued a T4A tax slip. So just keep that in mind. And if I didn't mention that already, if you're applying as a collective, even if it's an ad hoc collective that you just formed specifically to apply to this program, please be prepared to create a bank account in the name of the collective, because the grant recipient name should precisely match the applicant name on your application. As promised, I'm going to talk a little bit about our assessment process. TAC, one of the main Toronto Arts Council's principle is peer review. That basically means that artists themselves decide who is going to get the grant. Of course, not the artists who applied in this particular competition, but it's if you apply for this program, it will be somebody who are your peers, who are practicing artists working in Toronto, who are knowledgeable about community. With this program, it's multidisciplinary, so we are inviting artists to reflect the diversity of applicants in the pool in terms of demographic, geography, cultural background, as well as disciplines. To the best of our ability. There are approximately 5-6 people on the panel, so sometimes it's not possible to represent exactly all the applicants in the round, but those groups represented the most will definitely be represented on the panel, including the discipline representation. But because there will be probably just one artist working in the discipline that you're working in, they might not be working in the same genre within the discipline, for example. So as mentioned before, using plain language and really kind of trying to make your application as clear as possible to people who are not specialists or professionals in the field that you're working in is particularly important in this program. And so the panel will review all the applications, and they will assess the application based on the following criteria. Number one is artistic merit of the proposed project, and this is mostly being evident from your support material and from how you talk about what this project is. Then suitability of the proposed project for the space and resources available. This is mostly really to ensure the feasibility of the project and the knowledge, kind of the applicant being realistic about what they're planning to do in a particular branch. In this sense, site visit is strongly encouraged and recommended. There are folks at TPL you can get in contact with. Let me know if you need those numbers and emails, but also you can always just walk into the branch that is of interest to you and just see what's there and what's available and ask questions from whoever is in the branch at the moment, and demonstrate that knowledge of the branch in your application is always a great idea. Then the next criteria is quality of experience the proposed project will provide to the participants, branch customers, and the local community. As a strategic program, this particular aspect is really important because this program serves not only yourself as an artist accessing the space and funding for your work, but also serves those communities outside of downtown core to bring art to them locally, free of charge, in an accessible way. And then, of course, ability of the applicant to carry out the proposed project. Again, that will be evident from your support material, from your bio, what you've done in the past. But also, you know, if you're just starting as an artist in the city, or maybe starting as an artist altogether, that's fine. You can still apply, you can still be successful. Just work very carefully on your work plan, because this is where you're showing that you really know what you are doing and how you're going to do it. And of course, financial viability of the project as outlined in the budget. And I did talk enough already about how budget is really super, super important part of the application. A few grant writing tips. Read the program guidelines. The guidelines is largely what I've been talking about, just in a different format. But really reading through those and then, you know, reaching out to me if you have any questions is always a great idea. And this is where I suggest you start. Then, as mentioned, open a grant application and see exactly what is being asked. If you are working on the application in the portal, please remember to save draft, because the portal doesn't save draft automatically. Or else you can just copy the questions and the word limits elsewhere and work on the application in your own time and then transfer it back. Contact me with any question. If you're a first-time applicant, you can request application review or like draft review and feedback. Please allow enough time for me to review the draft and provide you feedback. If you are reaching out to me in the last few days before the deadline, I will very likely not be able to help you. Otherwise, I'll do my best to accommodate all the requests for review. Give yourself lots of time. I recommend not leaving to the last minute the filling out on the portal and the submitting the application portion, because you know it's technology. It might be imperfect. It might be slow, and it might cause stress that is easy to avoid if you just fill everything out and submit ahead of time. At the same time, you know, if you just had a great idea and you learned about the program a week before the deadline, if you can do it, you can do it. Still apply, and it still can be great and very successful. As mentioned, craft your project summary and overview in a clear, specific, and direct language. We recommend 5 W's: who, what, when, where, and why. And once you've written your summary and the description, look through those or read through those and make sure that those 5 questions starting with W are answered. Create a realistic and detailed budget, gather support material, again, see if something requires more time. For example, you have an amazing video that you would like to include, but it requires editing. Take a note of that when you're making your plan and allow enough time for yourself to work on that before the deadline. Get a feedback on your application, even if it's not me or anybody professionally working in arts funding. Asking somebody who is not deep inside of your project might be a great idea. And in fact, the least they know about arts and your particular arts practice, the better it is, because they will immediately tell you what parts of the applications are not maybe very clear. And really, if you ask me what successful application is, I would say clarity is number 1, right? Well, having a interesting, great idea about the project is one thing, but that is, that is a project question. When it comes to application specifically, as long as it's clear, it's great. And then, of course, follow instructions, complete all fields, and triple or double check your grant. And again, I'm here to answer any questions along the way. Couple of things to note before maybe even you decide to apply is the timeline on this program. Unlike some other grants program where you get the grant and then you just need to submit a report in a specified time, here the schedule is quite particular. So you need to submit your application by October 2nd. Then you will receive the results in approximately December of 2023. The successful applicants or the grant recipients will then take part in the program orientation that will happen in early March 2024. And then there will be some paperwork to be done both with TAC, but also with Toronto Public Library. You will be doing some paperwork. There is requirements to enter the artist agreement with TPL as well as TAC, and also vulnerable sector check for certain programs, which will be, TPL will help you. They also actually will reimburse the cost for vulnerable sector check for up to 3 artists working on one project. But all those things take time. So planning for some admin workload in this program is important. Do reflect that in the budget, and kind of make sure that the dates that are outlined here work for you, and not just, you submit your application and then you don't work on this at all until fall of 2024. That's not going to work, because a lot of things will have to be prepared in advance of your program launch, and also including really planning for time for outreach is really important. And for outreach to happen, contracts need to be signed, all the marketing material have to be prepared and put on the TPL website, and also TAC can share your materials if you share those with us, and so on. So keeping that in mind and ensuring that you're available to work on that timeline. And also keeping in mind that the final reports will be due 90 days after the project completion. And this concludes my information video about Artists in the Library program. On the screen is my contact information, which includes my phone number, email, and also a link where you can book a one-on-one meeting with me to ask any questions, and also to request the application draft review if it applies to you. Please check out the calendar and book time ahead of time if you'd like, or feel free to email me with any questions. And I wish you all the best with the application, and thank you for your interest in Artists in the Library program. Bye-bye.